Hello student, welcome to the lecture on novel, and after this lecture we will be able to learn the following objectives. Understand elements of the novel, explain forms of novels, describe strategies for reading a novel, explain example of a USA novel. Introduction. Let us start with a novel. What is a novel? A novel is a fictional piece of prose written in narrative style, usually defining a series of events described in a sequence. Novels have a few unique characteristics. First, a novel is written down rather than being told orally. Secondly, novels are meant to be fictional rather than myths. A novel shares two basic characteristics with the epic and the romance. These are a story and a storyteller. An epic tells story of gods and extraordinary men and women and is an amalgam of myth, history and fiction. A romance tells story of larger-than-life characters and events. These are different than a novel because the characters in a novel are human characters as it manifests itself in society. Let me tell you about the development of a novel. The term novel is derived from Italian word novella, which means a little new things. Such works were written to deflate romantic or idealized fictional forms. An example is Cervantes' Don Quixote, which is a story of a man who tries to live life and explores the reality of life. A novel emphasizes specific and observed details. Picaro is Spanish for rogue. An example of Picaresque stories are Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe 1719 and Moll Flanders 1722. Daniel Defoe was considered as realistic fiction writer. The first novel of character is Pamela by Samuel Richardson in 1740. Defining of novels. We shall continue our discussion on great novels in English literature. Some scholars put a minimum length of 120 pages for a fictional work to qualify as a novel. Shorter ones are called novellas. The English novel reached full bloom in Victorian era with Hard Times and David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. Novels received a wide distribution only after the printing presses became common. Novels finally gained an acceptable position in English literature, outpacing plays, poetry and works of non-fiction during 19th and 20th centuries. Novels sometimes influence social behavior. Novel that drew the United States to a civil war is the abolitionist novel Cabin by Uncle Tom. Let us study a few reasons for the novel's popularity. Since it closely represents the lives of people, it became more popular than poetry and drama. Its social scope expanded to include middle and working class, leading to increasing popularity. A large leadership came from women and servants, hence it addressed the concerns of these two groups. As novels gained popularity, experimentation started. Experimenting with different modes of presentation started when Thackeray and Dickens told their stories through an omniscient narrator who is aware of all events of the novel. Henry James used the technique of point-of-view narration so completely that the minds of his characters became the basic of interest of the novel. After understanding the meaning and growth of novel, let us now study about types of novels. First is commercial fiction. It is divided into many genres or categories. It helps readers find out the type of novel they like to read. For example, someone interested in reading a novel on romance can find it directly at a bookstore. The second type is literary fiction. It is generally lumped together in all bookstores as general fiction or literature. After studying about all aspects of novels, let us now move on the elements of novel. Plot is essentially the story or the events that make up the book. This makes a great story. Character development. Each story requires different type of character development. It means bringing character to life in reader's mind. Writing style. Style should add to the texture of the novel, following the basic writing rules. Length. The length should be appropriate to the genre and to the story. The Notebook was edited from 80,000 words to 45,000 words. Forms of novels. Let us discuss forms of novels. Allegory. The surface, which is a good read, is a means to an end of a deeper meaning, common in religious stories. Characters. The novel moves on through characters who relate to others. Comic novels. These are considered cruel and pessimistic view of life. It lacks depth in the world discussed. Epistolary. These are in form of letters, emails, or diary entry. It shows a psychological potential. Feminist. A woman's consciousness is highlighted within the male-dominated world. Gothic. These are set in faraway lands in fantastical worlds seeking perfection. Magic realism. Events are bizarre, supernatural, or mythical. Narrative structure. It is the structure which runs the story, arranges the elements, gives actions to characters. Narration. Most common is the third-person narration. However, a character can also be a narrator. Naturalism. Influenced by Darwin, it stretches environment, family line, and deterministic outcome. Picaresque. A setup and denial of romance where the character tackles their predicaments which are too powerful. Psychological. Least part of the novel is presented through a mind easy to be narrative. It may be incorporated into a more conventional narrative structure. Readerly. It is simple and realistic to read. Realism. This involves the reader getting lost in the world of characters as they work through the plot. Romance. This form of novel goes beyond the ordinary experience in search of an alternative world through a fantastical journey. Satire. This novel tends to comic but fact constructive in its criticism to make things better. Stream of consciousness. In this, reader thinks and exhibits a hope and fear and needs instant decision on all kinds of matters. Writerly. It's usually beyond realism. Strategy for reading novels. A story is a fictitious tale written to entertain, amuse, or instruct the reader. A novel is longer and more complex. Let us understand the 6 elements used by authors when they write a story or a novel. Characters are the first element to look when reading a novel. These can be humans, animals, or fiction characters. The story is often seen through the eyes of the main character. Setting is second element looked at when reading a novel. It means a location like home, countryside, town is revealed early in the story. The time when the story takes place is a third element. It could be recent or many years ago, told at the beginning of the story. The problem is the fourth element we looked at when reading a story. It is the problem between the main character and some other character in the story. The events are the fifth element looked at when reading. It is an attempt at solving the problem in the story. These events make up the most of the story. The solution is the sixth and final element of the story. It means how a problem is resolved, told at the end of the story.
We're going to define the elements of that short story, and then we're going to demonstrate mastery of short story elements. And that just means you're going to prove that you really know all of the elements that we're talking about today. So short stories often contain structural and character elements that should be familiar to you. So you need to know the pieces that make up a short story or a novel or anything so that you can discuss those specifically. Often, especially when you get into high school, you're going to hear teachers talk about specific elements, whether it be plot or characterization or setting or point of view, and all of those things contribute to what makes the overall short story. So what are the elements? Well, the elements are, there's a theme, and we're going to discuss each of these in detail in the following slides. So there's a theme, there's settings, there's characters, there's point of view, there's characterization, and there's plot. And we're going to spend a good deal of time talking about the plot and the way that all good plots work. So first of all, theme. What's a theme? A theme is the main idea of the story or of a literary work. And it's usually like a general sort of thing, like the theme is grief, if it's about someone who's lost someone through death, or the theme is love, Those are sort of like the overall, you kind of could say that's what the story's about. What's it about? It's about this theme. Short stories generally stick to one theme, where novels may have more than one, 2, 3, or 4 even, themes running throughout. But short stories tend to only deal with one theme because it's so short. The setting is not just the place in which a story takes place. And many people think setting, they think of theater, there's a set, it's where it is. But the setting is also the time. So we have some short stories that take place, in the Old West or in the future or in the present day. That's the time of the setting, and then the place would be where. Is it in America? Is it in Canada? Is it in outer space? Some short stories take place in one room. That would be the setting. Now, characters is one that I'm not going to spend time on because I think you're familiar with that. Characters are the people in the story. Whoever's in the story is a character. Characterization is something different, though. Characterization is the description of the personalities of characters in the story. So the way that a character lets us know about, or the way the author, lets us know about a character. And that's where authors really have to be mindful and be very, they have to use their craft. They'll reveal characters by actions they do, or by things they say, or sometimes by things they don't say. Sometimes the author lets us into the character's mind so we can see what they're thinking. Those are all elements of characterization, and by the end of a good short story, with the major characters at least, you should get a good sense of the type of person that is. Now, point of view is basically the storyteller from whose point of view the story is being told, or the narrator, basically who is telling us this story. And there's more, but really there's three point of views that you see often in stories. The first one is first person, and that's where the author is the actual person telling the story, is part of that story. So it's in the first person. I was at home and a knock came to my door. If that's what's written, then the author is a character themselves. Third person has two sides to it. There's an objective and an omniscient. The third person objective means the author is an observer who can't get inside people's head. So you can't hear what other people are thinking, but the author's not a character. So an example is, she took the phone and threw it at him. We don't get information about what she's thinking when she does that, we just see the action. So it's almost like the author's like a video camera that's filming the whole scene. And the third type of point of view that we're going to talk about is third person omniscient. Now, omniscient means like all-knowing. So the author is an observer who knows what one or more characters are thinking. So when you read short stories and the author says something like, "I'll never live this down," thought Jake as he trudged home. Well, the only way we would know that Jake thought that is if the author was inside Jake's head. So if the author sort of knows one character or more characters and sort of what they're thinking, that's third person omniscient. So you have first person, third person objective, and third person omniscient. Finally, we're going to talk about plot. Now, plot is the sequence or order of events in a story. Now, the plot includes 5 elements, and we're going to talk about the first 2 here, and that's the rising action. So that's sort of what's going on in the story to lead us up to caring. Basically, what is happening in the story, the rising action. And generally, the rising action gets readers interested in the story. The conflict are the struggles or problems between opposing forces. Now, we've talked about this in class, I'm sure, and if we haven't, we will be. The conflict is, every single story has a conflict. It may be a boring conflict, it may be a really exciting conflict. But if you think of any sort of art that comes across with storylines, whether it be movies or television shows or books or short stories or even a lot of poems, there's a conflict. Something has gone wrong or something has happened that requires the characters to react.
After studying the elements of a novel or a story, let us study how to write a literary novel. It offers perspective. Some advices may contradict each other. Now, the instruction before we write are: review classic texts to understand literary tradition, read contemporary novels to understand current conversation in literary fiction. The instruction to follow while we write are: a serious and professional approach should be used. Share writing with peers and listen to the feedback. Revise your writing to ensure it accomplishes the intended effect. After we write, keep few advices in mind. Approach literary agent specializing in literary fiction. Novels of experimental kind find homes in independent and small presses. Rejections are common and should not be taken personally.
I'm going to write a novel.
For the love of all that is holy, why?
Because I'm going to be a writer.
I've never seen you show even the slightest interest in books.
It's going to be a bestseller.
Now that I think about it, I've never even seen you read a book.
That's because all fiction novels suck.
What was the last book you read?
I saw all of the Harry Potter movies.
That's not what I meant. So what's your book about?
It's science fiction crossed with chick lit crossed with literary fiction.
Do you even know what any of those things mean?
I quit my job this morning.
Oh no. Please tell me you didn't.
I just bought a new laptop. A MacBook Air.
Have you ever attempted to write a novel-length manuscript?
I've already written the first page. It's really awesome. I plan to finish by the end of the week. Do you think I can get it published in time for the Christmas shopping season? I'm going to need the money soon.
It's December 4th. Probably not.
I suppose that's okay. I'll just max out my credit cards.
You do realize it takes years of honing your craft before you'll be ready to produce a publishable book. And that's assuming you've spent the last 20 years reading hundreds of novels.
I've been living my life. Not wasting my time reading. What do you think I am, some kind of dork?
Wow. So how do you plan to get your book published?
I'm going to take a copy to Random House.
I think my heart just stopped.
They've never seen anything like this. I know they'll want to talk to me right away.
That's not really how it works. To get a deal with one of the major publishers, you really need a literary agent.
Well, that will be easy enough. I'll just call a few and let them fight over me.
I wish I could kill you and get away with it. The average literary agent gets about 10,000 queries a year. In a good year, they might take on 2 new clients.
In fact, I think I will call them today.
Yeah. They don't take queries by phone. And your book is not even finished.
But my idea is a guaranteed bestseller. I'd better warn them not to steal my idea because it's copyrighted. Most agents are just losers who couldn't get book deals.
If you take the astonishingly stupid step of calling an agent, I wouldn't lead with that.
You're right. I'm really busy today anyway. I'll just send a mass email to a bunch of agents.
Get ready to be disappointed.
I'm thinking I'll only hire an agent who can promise me a 6-figure deal.
You may actually inspire all the agents in New York to come hunt you down with pitchforks and burn you at the stake.
Where do you think they will start my book tour?
I'm not sure I'm making myself clear. Let me try another approach. I assume you've used a steak knife, right?
Of course.
Do you think you're qualified to perform neurosurgery?
Haha. That's funny. I might base a character on you.
So do you think that being able to read and write your native language makes you qualified to write a novel?
How many editors will Random House assign to my novel?
-13.
Because it's going to need a lot of editing. I'm not the best speller.
My throat is starting to close up. The publishing industry really sort of expects you to have the whole spelling and grammar thing down.
But I'm the talent. That's what editors are for.
That's why you should expect to spend a few months on revisions before you ever let it see the light of day. It might be wise to crack open a book about the craft of writing. Stephen King wrote a good one called On Writing.
That sounds so boring. And totally unnecessary.
Fine. Are you ready to spend hundreds of hours banging away at your laptop?
Do you think they will let me direct the movie version of my book?
Are you ready to discover gigantic plot holes that are impossible to fill?
I'm a storyteller. It will all work out.
Are you ready to discover your characters are as one-dimensional as the ones in a pornographic movie?
I'm a student of the human condition. My characters will have depth and substance.
Are you aware that publishers are putting out fewer novels than ever?
Great. Less competition for me.
Are you ready to find yourself on page 50 and then think of an even better idea for a novel?
Hey, that's a good idea. I'm going to write several books at a time. I can maximize my earnings that way. Do you want to be a ghostwriter for me? I will cut you in for 10%.
I have a gun in my car. I'm going to go get it now.
Example of USA novel, Eat, Pray, Live by Elizabeth Gilbert. The tale begins with a heroine in Rome. The first quote, "Tell the truth, tell the truth, tell the truth," tells that Gilbert will not deceive. The early pages find a flashback of smart and successful Gilbert in sorrow and tears. Later on in 30-something, she leaves behind divorce, affair and depression. During wait for her divorce, she meets a medicine man in Bali. When she arrives in Indonesia, she realizes her own control, her reaction and control her life. Summary. Now in the end, let us summarize what we have learned in this lecture. A novel is a fictional piece of prose written in a narrative style, usually describing a series of events described in a sequence. There are two types of novels, commercial novels and literary novels. The elements of a novel are plot, character development, writing style, length. The 6 elements to write a story or a novel are characters, setting, time, problem, events and solution.